Good night and welcome to our second installment of Women Empowered in Business, or as we like to call it, the web series. I am Claudia McDowell, your moderator for this evening, and I'm representing St.Lucia as the communications officer. Tonight's event is brought to you by Boost, a virtual incubator and accelerator program, which is currently being spearheaded by St.Lucia. I am pleased to let all our viewers here tonight know that Boost's virtual community of strategic partners, startups, entrepreneurs, and business-minded individuals is easily accessible via www.booststlucia.com. That's SAINT. The web series is one of Boost's free virtual panel discussions, and it features women in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. This month's theme is policies, struggles, and enabling environments for women in entrepreneurship. We will be discussing the current policies in place to assist female entrepreneurs, the struggles that they face, and the current environment that exists for women to be successful. To start, I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So we will start with our visitor. She's not in St. Lucia right now. Samantha Sheoprashad.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Samantha Sheoprashad, and I'm all the way from Guyana. And I use technology to solve social issues. Some of the programs that I would have created to reduce poverty, youth unemployment, and inequality in Guyana are Innovator, Econeer, and recently we launched the Guyana Digital Innovation Program. And I am the co-founder of Trifinity Solutions, a digital software and a digital service that helps customer to grow online. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samantha. A fun fact about Samantha, she actually started her journey at 10 years old. She's been in youth development since she was 10. Our next guest panelist that I'd like to invite to introduce herself is Dr. Mbina-Lashley.
Thank you. As you've introduced me, I'm Dr. Lashley, Mbina-Lashley, and I am the program head for the Business Innovation and Sustainable Entrepreneurship Unit at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. I have been an educator for over 25 years, and during that span, I have taught programs in business, management, and entrepreneurship as well. I've also been the co-author of general publications in entrepreneurship and communication. But I've also been fortunate enough to engage in entrepreneurship as being a woman, manager and owner of two businesses, two very, 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 very rewarding businesses. My area of study is gender, and with specific reference to gender and education. I'm extremely happy to be a part of this discussion tonight, which integrates gender and entrepreneurship. And I'm sure that after this discussion is over, we will be able to work better towards degenderizing entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Dr. Lashley. So as you heard, she is an educator and an entrepreneur. So we have two ends of the spectrum tonight. Finally, I'd like to invite Alberta Richelieu to introduce herself. Alberta.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Alberta Richelieu. I'm an attorney at law by profession. I also studied international trade policy. I did economics and law as my bachelor's, and later did a master's in international trade policy. And later on, I went on to study law. I also have a deep passion for gender relations. And as a result, I ended up doing an internship at the United Nations Population Fund, where I do awareness in terms of the agenda for strengthening and empowering women in terms of their sexual and reproductive health rights, as well as their rights socially. It's more than a pleasure to be here this evening, and indeed I'm very happy to marry all the areas that I have studied as well as partaken tonight, and I hope that I can contribute meaningfully to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberta. So what she didn't say is she's actually the youngest panelist here, and she was the common denominator. Samantha and Maria had met Alberta before, but they didn't know each other. But now everybody is great, fine. So we're going to get straight into it. So our first question is one I think all of you would have heard in some different circles before. Do you think that a stigma exists where men are better entrepreneurs than women in the Caribbean? And why do you think so? Maybe we can start with Samantha.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I do believe that stigma do exist, and one of the reason why that is there is because we grew up in a society programmed and grooming men to think that they're better than women, and a society that program men and support men in a certain way that they don't support women. Like, for example, growing up, they told me that as a woman, I shouldn't pursue education. I shouldn't pursue tertiary education because I'm going to be a housewife. And what use will that be? And then, on the other hand, a man is being encouraged, he's being supported when it comes to his education. And a woman like me, I didn't get that support. I had to definitely stand up to that stigma and the status quo of wanting a tertiary education as a woman.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. Anybody else want to take it?
I'll go ahead. A lot of people would answer that question in a different way. And this is simply because they are conditioned by perception. And when we look at something like stigma, we define it basically as the direct social judgment about a person. And usually that stigma is negative. And this stems basically from societal stereotypes and beliefs. Now, when persons are asked what they assume, or what they think an entrepreneur looks like, they'll usually tell you it's male. And traditionally, in the areas of business and entrepreneurship, we had it was really considered as a male domain. Men traditionally were heads of households. They did business outside. They were breadwinners, and they basically had the characteristics that we term as masculine qualities. And these qualities were geared towards the activities in the business in entrepreneurship. Whereas women were considered nurturers, staying home. They didn't have those qualities or some of those qualities, and they were considered less equal than men. They didn't have these qualities. But traditionally, these perceptions of stigma and considering women as less or as not equal to men, these were practiced highly in patriarchal societies. And sometimes this stigma could have been brought out verbally, but in some cases it was quite subtle. But what we really need to remember, though, is gender differences are not innate. Basically, they are shaped by society. Again, we must also remember here that with education and the increase in entrepreneurship being in favor of the females, in favor of the females, it has allowed them to be able to go into the realm of entrepreneurship and use the skills that they already have, right? But in my studies of gender, there's this phenomenon. It's currently showing that boys are underachieving. And this again, because of this type of phenomena, we've seen that women have been able to get education and move into the realms of entrepreneurship. And this kind of is closing that disparity that is present within society. However, while women take on these kinds of roles that they're now taking on because of the education that they have gotten, we are now able to see women taking on different roles, and even some of the roles that were traditionally considered as male roles. They're beginning to take more risks. They are becoming more confident about themselves and about their businesses. They're even beginning to be aggressive decision makers. So you find that the roles are now changing and the stigma is now beginning to change. But in terms of understanding all of this again, we must remember that the roles that women are playing now are totally different, or are, I wouldn't say totally different, but are different from the roles that men have. And when we look at this in terms of the reasons also as to why they get into entrepreneurship, we find that women go into entrepreneurship maybe because they want to change up their profession, or maybe for financial independence, or they might even do that as a means of ensuring that they take care of those around them. But for men, basically, it is assumed, or there is the perception that they go into business simply, not they go into business because it is expected of them. And or sometimes they believe that they have the power to go into the power and are able to display that power. So the reasons are totally different. So in actual fact, when you look at the reasons and you also look at the areas in which women find themselves in and the type of relations that they have going through the entrepreneurship process and the activities involved in these processes, I would tend to really say that neither sex is better than the other. Both genders generally have different reasons as why they do things and why they navigate entrepreneurship. So while the stigma is there, it, as I said earlier, it is beginning to change. And this, the reason for that is because of the increased education and the willingness for women to want to go into these areas. So for me, I just believe that women and men do things differently. And that basically gives them different experiences related to entrepreneurship.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lashley, for this in-depth answer. That leaves you, Alberta, to address this question.
Okay, so I'm very happy that Dr. Lashley spoke before me, because she made several points that I wanted to make, in fact. So my pointers in terms of whether the stigma exists, I would say yes. And in terms of why the stigma exists, I would agree with Dr. Lashley that it's as a result of tradition and historically. And if we look historically, because I'm somebody, I normally like to look at the history of something to understand why it is the way it is. And if we really look at the history of us as human beings in general, what we saw was that generally men were the hunters. They were the ones who went out, and women, obviously for biological reasons, they tend to be the ones who were the caretakers as well as the nurturers. So obviously women having, for example, menstruating, it was difficult for them, seeing that there was not sufficient development at the time for them to easily go out and work and that sort of thing. So it made sense traditionally and historically for women to be the nurturers and to be the ones who stayed in the household. Whereas for men, they've always been the ones who've always traditionally been the hunters. So it's nothing really new in terms of how we grow up as a human race, in fact, for men to go out and ensure that at least, you know, some food is brought back to the household. Now, we have to look at a critical period, or rather a critical era in time where this had changed. And when I think about it, I think it's after World War II, where there were a lot of men who went out, and obviously the women were left behind. And obviously some of them, it was very difficult to find their husbands, or sometimes they would never see their husbands. And what do we have in a case like that? We see that a lot of these women, eventually, they had to go out and they had to be the breadwinners. And basically women were forced to go out into the working world. And what that meant is that the landscape of the economy really changed, meaning that there would be more women. And even apart from there being more women, what needed to happen was that they had to make the necessary adjustments in terms of ensuring that women had the necessary, for example, pads to ensure that when they go out to work, they would not be left behind. So all these things have been as a result of the stigma, and traditionally men have been the risk takers. And you would see that entrepreneurship, that innate quality which we have based on how we're socialized, is more likely associated with men. And because of that, we see that stigma still exists. And even then, men are more willing to take risks. So that is why I think the stigma exists. That is my contribution.
Thank you, Alberta. Your point about women having to forcefully sort of take up the roles that men did during the World War II and after is evident in different societies. Rhodesia, for example, there was a partial genocide. They lost all their men. And at some point, the women had to take over all of these roles. And the society has completely leaned over to men in present day. So for St. Lucia, research shows that a major contributor for the gender pay gap and gender disparities in career development is largely due to women being expected to be the primary child caregivers by both society and policy. Of course, it's not the only example. There are other policies that are not explicitly discriminating, but do contribute to the societal expectations of women. What policies do you believe can be implemented to improve the environment for women entrepreneurs? Alberta, maybe you can start us off.
Okay. So I tend to see policy that is basically after the fact. Mainly because, well, before I even go into policies at the macro level, I think it's important for us, like I said before, to look at even before how we can change the socialization of young girls. And I think that is where it should start before we even go to macro policies at those levels, because generally policies would apply. It can change certain things, but I think what we need to look into is changing the syllabus, changing what is available to young girls, and even changing what is expected of them. So for example, one suggestion is having business fairs where it's solely for women. I mean, in a situation like that, you encourage them to understand the business world, and even apart from that, you allow them to understand financial literacy. So all these things being made available to women at the integral level, meaning under 10, under 7, where they would understand, okay, this is what is required of me. Because if we start looking at policies in the general sense, sometimes it's mainly too late. By the time somebody is like 21, you've already been formed. You already have certain decisions and certain concepts of yourself. So I think we need to look before policy, prior to policies being placed. But notwithstanding that, I think policies are also important, mainly because I think, so policies, for example, ensuring, not necessarily in St. Lucia, but I'm speaking on a global scale. So in situations where there's child marriage, ensuring that women have access to sexual and reproductive health, women have access to basic needs such as sanitary napkins, that sort of thing. And these little things, I believe, make a big difference in business. It might sound small, and sometimes it might sound, de minimis, but the reality of the situation is that there are a lot of small things that really contribute to women actively participating in the economy. And I think we need to look at things like that, sexual and reproductive health, ensuring that women are supported in terms, for example, poorer women, it's more difficult for them to maintain their hygiene. How do we address that sort of issue? And only when we address these issues, like rural women, ensuring that they understand their cycle, their bodies, only then, when they are educated, can they move easily into the business world. Until then, it would be almost difficult to ensure that women actively participate in business and in the economy at large.
Thank you, Alberta. Samantha, would you mind?
Oh, no problem. I think both speakers would have contributed to a lot. So I'm gonna just be very short. A lot of women, right, do not have access to healthcare and even education, right? And if you, let's say, you get pregnant in your teens, um, society just discard you and say, well, okay, all you can do is just being pregnant, and you need to take care of baby, right? So sometimes that in itself puts a woman to now put her education aside. Not many countries have had policies and programs in place to have those kind of things, sort of being cushioned, right? And then when we speak about health, women's mental health taken for granted. Taken for granted. I am speaking um, from experience, and I'm speaking from what I see. Many times women have to put their health, like today, a young lady called me and she was crying on the phone and she was saying, I have to go and teach with my baby. I have to, there's nothing in place to say, well, okay, you have some sort of compensation to take care of your child. She have to go and teach with her baby in the classroom in the middle of a pandemic. And that I don't think is fair, right? I think maternity leave also is something that needs to be extended. A woman should be given the right to take care of her child because that's her child and the child will definitely need her. I think 3 months is very short. And a child development require both mother and father. And definitely, I think that something should happen when it comes to policy in place for women to have better access, not just to healthcare, for them to be better caregivers of their family and the people around them. Many times, education, many times women are not given opportunity and access to education. And like Alberta said, if they're not giving these spaces where opportunity are, how is it that they are going to go out there and rival with business? Because the business world is definitely not an easy place, and it's a place with a lot of failure, and we are known to be emotional beings. How do we recover from all of that, you know so I think policies definitely need to change. We get free condoms, but we don't get free sanitary napkins.
Samantha, I'm really an advocate for free pads right now. So I agree with you here. And to add to your comment about maternity leave, I also think that policies should cater for paternity leave as well, so that childcare doesn't fall completely on the woman, so that she can also take up these opportunities available to a man who has a child. So thank you for your contribution, Samantha. Maria, that leaves you. Your mic is off.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think the two other panelists have hit that right on the head. But what I wanted to add here basically is that when we're looking at it in terms of policies that would be implemented to enforce or to enhance the environment for women entrepreneurship, we must recognize that entrepreneurship has been seen basically as a source of economic growth. And if we are looking at it in terms of economic growth, we understand that the impact is extremely high, because you notice the sectors in which women are gravitating to. They are concentrated greatly in the service sector. So the policies that need to be implemented here should focus on the needs of the women in those sectors. Focus on what they need, what would give them the opportunity to move from one area to the next. And also we need to take a look at the different areas or the dimensions in entrepreneurship. Now, this is from startup to incubation to scaling of their business. So you would find that policies generally need to look at these areas and focus in these particular areas so that it gives women the opportunity to understand who they are and what they are doing through these stages that they're going through. But one of the things that I have noticed generally is that for policies to really be informed, you need data. And here in the Caribbean and in other regions as well, you find that this data is very, very fragmented. It is fragmented to the point that sometimes you might not even be able to get the information, access the information, or there is no information whatsoever. So when we're looking at policies, we must ensure that the data speaks to the issues that women are having in all these dimensions of entrepreneurship. We must also ensure that the policies that are implemented, there is some sort of evaluation of these policies. What are they saying? What do we know about the sector where women are? How are women performing in business? And I say this because I think within the region, this data is difficult to come by. You really have to search because we have not looked at it in terms of as other countries have looked at it. So whatever is happening in these sectors is just happening. If you were to ask me how many women businesses are in the service sector within the region, I would have to guess because I wouldn't really know, because in certain areas that information is not there. So the policies to enhance or improve the environment for women, they are there. It's not to say that they are not there, but they also need to focus on creating equal access to education and training. It's important. Equal access to finance and access to credit. All these things need to come into play for the environment to thrive and for women to thrive as well. So remember, we're talking about economic growth. If you're able to provide policies that are positive and impact positively on women, it helps with the growth of your GDP, because more women will be encouraged to come because the policies are there and available for them, and they can see what these policies represent.
Thank you, Maria. I really commend you for bringing up the data point, because it's like, well, how do we know what policies we want to change and why? Because if we don't have a reason to do it, then it will never change. So we do really have to advocate for data collection and improvement in our research in the Caribbean, not just in St. Lucia. And I'm sure Samantha can agree to some extent.
Yes, I do, because whenever you're solving a problem, you have to first prove that there is a problem with data, and data is very difficult to find in Guyana. And I think it's also a difficulty in the Caribbean. And that is why a lot of our problems still do exist, because we don't know what exactly our problem is. We can't say via statistics or via data, this is the problem, because sometimes that is not the problem. We just assume this is the problem.
Yes.
Okay, so we're about 30 minutes into our discussion and we don't have much time. So we're going to breeze through the last two questions. The third one is, what are the main struggles and concerns that you believe that women in entrepreneurship go through, or what do you hear most mentioned from women?
Can I go?
Yes, sure.
Women experience a lot of struggles going through their journey, and for us basically to pinpoint one would be extremely difficult, because they go through these struggles throughout their journey. But what I have seen and experienced being an entrepreneur as well is the balance between work and family. As an entrepreneur, you know, and as a single parent, you find that you have to balance the roles of family and work. And most times we find that women like us, we kind of leave business, we sacrifice business, right? And we ensure that we take care of the responsibilities of our home. If you don't have childcare, your attention in business is limited, because you're focusing on who's taking care of my child. And even if you do have that support, you have to ensure that that support is credible, that support is available for you when you need it. And in most times, if you take a look at our environment here in St. Lucia, how many women can actually tell you that they have significant or good child care? You usually see women in their little businesses, and their children are there with them. So the attention that you would pay towards your business is minimalized. So you find it is an issue that a lot of women say, because they have to balance these dual roles. And just to add one thing, we talk about the dual roles of family and work, but it extends a little further, especially when you are an entrepreneur. You have your own job, you're an entrepreneur, your own business, you have family to take care of, and then you also have another job, your pay job, the one that keeps you going throughout the day. So there are three elements here that you have to really deal with and juggle. So this is one that I find a lot of women talk about and experience.
I'd just like to add to your childcare contribution that finding quality childcare is one thing, but finding childcare that's affordable, because there's a gross majority of women in the Caribbean who are on the poor end of the spectrum, who cannot find quality or affordable childcare. So how do you go to work? How do you manage your business with the full responsibility of childcare? Alberta, would you like to take it next?
Yes, sure. In terms of what I think women really lack, I would say it's self-confidence. We are constantly told that we're not good enough, we need to do something better, something isn't right. And it's almost like a pandemic, rather, where women lack self-esteem. So many of us would feel like, oh, well, I'm too fat, or I'm too skinny, or, we constantly feel that way. And if we feel that way about ourselves, far less to feel confident in what we can do. And I think that's one of the major barriers in terms of women wanting to go into business, because what that would mean is that you would question yourself several times before even saying, okay, maybe I should start up this business. But even separate and apart from that, I think, like Samantha touched on, mental health. Mental health is important. Interestingly enough, that Samantha would touch on that. I had done some research in terms of women and mental health in terms of their menstrual cycle and generally their life cycle. So there was a tendency that women who, after pregnancy, their hormones would have been in disarray. And so you would tend to see that depression and that sort of thing. Now, if it is that we want to adequately support women in terms of what it is, what are the main issues, we would have to support them fundamentally and at the foundation. And I think that is where it lies, in our confidence and in supporting women in terms of their mental health and what makes us unique in terms of our menstrual cycle and throughout the period of our life.
Thank you, Alberta. Samantha?
I think we fail to understand the blueprint of a woman's development. We are not given the handbook to become parents, women. I'm speaking about. We're not given the handbook to become good mother, good wife, responsible sisters. Most of the time we are criticized, we struggle to find our own balance, because when we grow up to be a well-groomed young person, we're often introduced to the idea of marriage rather than the idea of starting a business, the idea of having education, the idea of being empowered or feeling empowered. So we are going into an illusion that society put us into. And then that illusion, we're left in the middle of nowhere to struggle with some of the decisions that maybe your family or friends or colleague project on us because this is the way of society. And then we're left pregnant. Sometimes you you your marriage does not work because obviously you were not ready for this. You didn't understand, what would happen when you get married, because obviously marriage is painted as a fairy tale and not as a way you have to compromise and you have to work things out. And this is a part of marriage. This is a part of relationship. This is part of being mother. Some mothers cannot handle the stress of dealing with their children or managing family. It takes a toll on their mental health. So if we are going to look at this as a struggle, then that's a problem. I think we need to look at this as a part of a woman's development. And being part of a woman's development, we need to first educate ourselves on some of the challenges on a holistic level that is happening to women and that women are facing in society. Because if we don't see this in terms of this perspective, then we will go an entire generation again failing women.
Thank you, Samantha. Like Alberta and both Samantha pointed out, women's mental health is probably not paid enough attention to, but specifically women's mental health around the natural processes that our bodies go through, menstruation and pregnancy, and that we're already naturally emotional beings, like one of you pointed out. So thank you for your contributions. Our very last question, it goes, what role can women play in closing the gender disparities in entrepreneurship? Maria, would you like to start?
Sure. In terms of closing the gap, really, what we really need to take a look at is that women need to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are available to them. These opportunities are there. They just have to be able to go out there and source them and use them in their business ventures or in their entrepreneurship venture. They also need to make use of the knowledge that they have. A lot of women are educated. In the Caribbean, it goes without saying, women are educated. Use that education to seize the opportunities to become innovators, to become managers and owners and leaders in your own business. This gives you a sense of ownership. It gives you a sense of knowing that I can do this. So we find that if we encourage women to make use of the opportunities that are available to them, it would be so much easier, and it would allow other women to see the skills, to know the skills that they can use and utilize them in creating new ventures. But one of the important things that I'd want to add there is that successful entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in business, women especially, they should be able to invest in other women, and act as mentors to these young persons. By acting as mentors, basically, and it allows the young persons to take advantage of the situations that they're in, and they want to go into areas such as entrepreneurship. So there's a visibility when successful entrepreneurs invest, and not only invest financially, but invest with the knowledge that they have, invest in ensuring that the women, the advice that they give the women is something that they can use and follow through. and also understanding that women generally need that encouragement. With that encouragement, you're able to move forward. And it is important that once you allow women to do this for other women, to mentor them, and most of all, to encourage them, this gives the young women the avenue to grow and develop. And it basically will change the rhetoric or the discussion in terms of women and entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Maria.
And I'm very happy with what Maria just indicated. So let me just stick a pin. One of the things she spoke about is us in using our knowledge, and not necessarily our knowledge in terms of educational knowledge, but traditional knowledge. Obviously, as nurturers, there would be certain things that we would understand that we might need as compared to perhaps a man, despite him being a father. So I think with the new landscape of the economy, as I indicated, there's more consumer power in the female. Women are spending more, they're able to spend more. And I think that is an avenue that a lot of women can go into. And we're seeing it more and more. For example, a lot of women are going into the the permanent makeup, because it's quite a lucrative industry. And we see women going into makeup lines and that sort of thing. And I think with that, there is an opportunity with women having more spending power and that sort of thing. We can use our knowledge, not just in terms of, making sure we look pretty, but also in terms of what is it as a mother that you might require to solve a problem that perhaps you can reap some profits from. So in using those sort of things, our knowledge, what we have, the power in the female at this point in time, in terms of them being a consumer, that is where we can actually assist in terms of closing the gap and the disparities that exist between men and women.
Alberta, I'm really happy that you pulled in the traditional skills that women have had over time and how we can use it. Earlier this year, I read an article in Forbes where they were encouraging employers, managers, bosses to employ their emotional side during this time, because in this entire pandemic, people have been going through a roller coaster of emotions and everything has been, going haywire. And really valuing the emotional side of, your emotional skills. It did come into play during this pandemic. And it wasn't just women. We have a lot of male bosses as well. And they had to get in touch with that side at this point. It wasn't just, all go. Samantha, would you like to take the question now?
Yes, sure. I believe that women need to now bring their chair to the table, because meaning that opportunity are no longer given to us, we need to create those opportunities and not just use our knowledge, but develop an own natural skill set that we have as women to create that environment, that enabling environment around us. We need to be more involved in politics, policy development, because the politics and the policies affect us. But the people who are creating the policies and who are driving the politics behind it, it's not necessarily us who it's affecting, right? And I believe that we need to be more involved in decision-making process that is pertaining to us as women, because we do understand the struggle and the challenges that we're facing, and we would be able to attest to that challenge. So I think women need to be more involved in policy development. I know entrepreneurship is a big one right now. We need to be involved in our development at a very personal level, at a community level, at a national level, and of course at a global level.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So this brings us to the end of our panel discussion, but I do want to let our audience and panelists know that this entire series is being sponsored by the St.Lucia Development Bank. The St.Lucia Development Bank is also on the task force of BOOST, the Virtual Incubator and Accelerator Program. Who is bringing this event to you tonight?
One of the things I wanted to note and indicate to all of those who will be listening to this segment and this session is that we have to forego the mentality that women never worked. In fact, we have always worked. It's just that we have not traditionally worked. And in fact, I mean, I was having a discussion with my partner earlier, and what a very important point he made was that women are in fact managers. They have been very good managers because they have been managing households for centuries and they know what is necessary. They have the necessary skills, and they're sufficiently equipped to manage outside of households. So understanding the mere fact that we as women, we have those skills. It's not that we do not have those skills. We can use our weaknesses to our advantage. When I say our weaknesses, our perceived weaknesses in terms of our emotions, we can use it to our advantage, mainly because we can bring in the emotional aspect into a lot of companies, which a lot of employees very often feel that is not present. And it's a missing factor in a lot of workplaces. And even as managers, we are less likely to take risks. And even with that, there is a positive, because that would mean that women are in a position to better and adequately manage businesses. And we're seeing that even in this global pandemic, I mean, I've been more than startled by the contributions of Jacinta Ardern and Angela Merkel and all the others who have actively managed the coronavirus pandemic very well within their countries. And that in itself can be a lesson for each of us as women to understand that we possess the necessary qualities to manage the affairs of a country, of a business, and of a household.
That is a great point, Alberta. We have been working. And it's not just our Western society or our traditions. Women have been working all over the world. There are many other cultures. So we can pull lessons from that as well. Anybody else?
I think women are also good at budgeting, and that is a very good skill that a lot of us out there do not have. They always have some little thing put in the corner for, I think, it's hard time or bad time. So women are good at budgeting as well.
Okay.
I think Dr. Lashley wants to make a point, but your mic is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. In terms of looking at the entrepreneurial environment, one of the things that I have really noticed, and significantly more in this pandemic, is that a significant amount of women have decided to do their businesses online. The growth of women entrepreneurship online has really exploded in this time, in this pandemic. And I think basically, obviously, the women are able to get other women to see what their products are and what they are doing. And you already know that women shop. It doesn't matter whether it was the physical shop or anything, they just shop. And this was a time when the audience or the customers or the client base for women entrepreneurs, they had a really good client base. And now we see that the number of businesses, especially women-based businesses, has really shot up on the internet. And this also goes to show that they're using the technology and they're beginning to bridge the digital divide. So women are moving in that stride, and it's a good thing for entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Maria. I just want to mention that, as you pointed out, that a lot of businesses have moved online. Well, Boost is a virtual incubator and accelerator program. Our entire service is virtual, and anybody, any woman, any man, any young person can access it online We're also partnering with the United Nations Development Program based in Barbados, but serving the Caribbean. And they've recently launched an eFutures campaign, which we're also on board with. There's a whole list of educational material in entrepreneurship and other skills and services that you can find absolutely free on either St.Lucia.com or on the UNDP website. And yes, you can access anything you need, a lot of what you need to run your online business.
Yes.
I know Melody just made a statement in the chat where she said some women can empower, but they choose not to because they tend to think that you will do better than them with the knowledge and advice that they give. And I think that is one of the topics that perhaps we did not touch on. But yes, I think it's very relevant as a woman going into business. That is one of our main downfalls, actually. We tend to have this sort of feisty, catty sort of approach as opposed to a collaborative approach. So I believe that is a very valid point.
Yes, it is.
I really think it's a Caribbean thing as well. It's a Caribbean women's thing that we tend to be so catty and slightly aggressive at times when you come up with these suggestions, ideas, or like Melody said. Melody is our audience member who asked the question, who made the comment, sorry. What policy changes would you recommend to encourage innovative and entrepreneurship culture among women? Dr. Lashley, the audience member directed it specifically to you.
Okay, could you repeat the question again, please?
What policy changes would you recommend to encourage innovative and entrepreneurship culture among women?
Like I said earlier, policies are there, and we need to focus those policies to relate to the current environment. A lot of the policies that we are getting right now are policies that have been developed in areas that are innovation driven, and they might not simply apply to the situations that we find. So we need, first and foremost, to look at those policies, understand what those policies are, and are they relating to our current entrepreneurial environment. And this way, if we're able to identify whether they're making sense for our environment, we can work with them. But if they're not, then we need to identify what basically works. So there could be a change in terms of, because the environments where the policies that have been developed on the global scale might not necessarily be what we need right now. So those are the kind of changes that we need to look at and ensure that, like I said, meets the needs of our entrepreneurial environment for women.
Okay, does anybody else want to take the question? I think any of you are capable of answering as well.
I just want to make a comment to the fact that, okay, it's a Caribbean thing with the cat fight kind of thing with women. I believe that we need to move away from the scarcity mindset and move towards abundance mindset. And that will help us to understand the power of collaboration, because when you do think about sustainable development and sustainability, collaboration is basically the key for community development when it comes to thinking and acting in a very sustainable manner. And one of the key driver for many great programs is due to collaboration. And that collaboration have to build based on certain human capital, right? And how is it that we are going to work establishing maybe some sort of policy or ground rules for the relationship to last, right? So I don't think we are very good at that. We're very fond of something like that. I notice a lot of women sometimes who are in my field, they behave very territorial until they get to know me personally. the reaction at first sometimes with people who might be on the same platform or the same agenda with me, yeah, begins very in a very territorial manner until I sort of show them, well, okay, this is who I am. So sometimes the things that people fear are not necessarily the things that we should fear, but we should learn how to utilize other people's skills and talent to also contribute to our development.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like you mentioned, the territorial sort of attitude, and I mentioned a little aggression earlier. These things can really be used for our own attitude change as women in the Caribbean towards our entrepreneurship goals, our leadership goals. It doesn't have to be used in a negative manner that we're being slightly aggressive or territorial or catty. Any other? I don't see any other questions right now. Okay. I don't know if we have any other contributions that anybody else wants to make. We have audience members here, but I don't see any more questions right now.
Just to add, I think separate and apart from us having difficulties in terms of confidence, very often we also get intimidated because we often, as a woman, especially a woman involved in entrepreneurship or business, you're in a male dominated field and you constantly have to remind yourself that I am different, I look different, I think differently. And you also have to deal with other things such as the male domineering position where it's like, oh, basically you're not smart enough necessarily, but you deserve to be, oh, you deserve to be my wife and not necessarily my business partner. So these are some of the challenges that we as women constantly have to face, and we have to remind ourselves daily that we are able to overcome it. And even in the male domineering fields, that we should speak to other people and even look to possible other women who can mentor us and guide us in terms of ensuring that we are able to more or less deal with those obstacles that sometimes we will face.
That's great, Alberta. Why do any of you believe that we have these confidence issues as women? Because all of you sort of mentioned it to some extent when we were speaking about the challenges. I know we mentioned our traditional roles. We mentioned the skills that boys have been equipped with throughout history. But what do you really think some of those confidence issues might stem from?
I think it starts basically because we have been programmed into thinking, well, oh, growing up, girls are not supposed to do this. Like if I wear a short pants, people will judge me. They will think that this is bad. And if I did my hair a certain way, they will judge me. Or if I do something that I'm not supposed to do, so hence, you always checking and comparing as a woman. You're basically being programmed. Oh, sit this way. Oh, do this way. You know, you're always being basically programmed to think, well, oh, I'm not getting this right, or what would people say about me, or what would people think about me? Like these are things that women commonly faced. I remember facing one of those challenges where short pants was a problem for the mother of the young man who I wanted to marry. And I had to tell her point blank, well, if my pants is too short, then I can't marry your son. So these are things that when they happen to us, we need to address it, and we need to address it very strongly as women. Because if the society is telling us we can't be this type of person, or my pants is too short. A few morning ago, I launched a project for national development and basically speaking about national development. And then a professor called me out for wearing too much lipstick. You know, these are things that we're faced with. So if these are things that are there, it sort of eats away from your confidence after a while.
Thanks, Samantha.
That is a very valid point. To add on to what Samantha said, I have experienced that several times where people will tell you things like, "Oh, you're a lawyer. You shouldn't. You're a professional. You shouldn't be wearing that, or you shouldn't be going on with a two-piece on the road, or oh, that is not good enough." And every single day you are reminded of it. It's not something that you can put aside, and you have to have the mental capacity and the strength to tell yourself, okay, I'm strong enough. I'm able to do this. I don't really care what anybody has to say. I feel comfortable with myself. And we have that mindset of victim blaming where we hear, oh, she got raped. Well, she was looking for it, So these are the sort of things that might seem like simple social issues. These things feed into our economy and women being empowered in other aspects in terms of business and the economy and what they can and cannot do. So, and it's strange that Samantha would say, who said it? It wasn't the father, but rather the mother. You see, we see where these things are entrenched and where it's coming from. So all these things we have to be cognizant of, even us as women, when we have our children, how we empower our girls. I mean, our boys need to be empowered too, but how do we empower our girls, and how do we empower our boys for the girl they're going to marry or the girl they're going to be with? So all these things come into play, and each of us have an individual responsibility to ensure that whatever the child that we bear or we nurture, or those in our families, that we ensure that those sort of mentalities are erased or diminished, so that we can promote a society that empowers women and men alike.
Thanks, Alberta. Maria, would you like to add anything before we end?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that in terms of confidence, confidence also can stem from the home and the social capital around the home, right? I'll just give you an example. In some African countries, when women are growing up, they are told that you must do this to please the male gender, or you must do that to be able to be a good wife. Now, if you are not very, very clear about the roles that you have to perform, your level of confidence drops. And you find that when women eventually marry, right, when they eventually marry whoever it is that they're marrying, their level of confidence is really, really low. So we must remember that this confidence issue stems also from in the home, where women don't encourage you and they tell you that you must do certain things, otherwise you won't be considered as a whole woman. So you have to look at these things and understand that the social capital around you, where you are, basically creates that lack of confidence in a lot of young women in a lot of countries.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. If I thought of it earlier, I would have really loved to ask your opinions on how men can play a role in closing the gender disparities in entrepreneurship. But we will have to save that for our next discussion if we ever meet again, the 3-4 of us. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to our panelists, Samantha, Maria, and Alberta. It was really lovely having you. I enjoyed this. I hope you did too.
Yes, we did.
And I hope our audience did and will have a good time. We're going to be posting this on our social media pages, so anybody can access it to watch it all over again, 2-3 times. Share it with your friends, share it with your mothers, your sisters, your brothers, the men and women in your lives who are affected by gender disparities, policy discrepancies, gender gaps in our entrepreneurial community. Thank you again for coming. And with that,
thank you.